and welcome to a brand new video. Today we have a quite interesting, new, mysterious case, and I work very hard on this investigation, and I truly spent a lot of time trying to find theories, inconsistencies, sources, and all of that. I'm really excited because I have it fresh on my mind. I just finished the investigation. I have it all clear in my head to tell you everything that happened in this case. But before we start, remember to follow me. You know I have a billion social media accounts. Subscribe to this channel and activate the notification bell so I'll let you know when I upload a new video. Well, oh my god, I'm nervous. Let's talk about this case. The mysterious case of KRIS and LISANNE FROON. Well, I'm not going to dive that deep into these girls' lives because there's not much information, but I do know some stuff that's important for the case. On one hand, we have LISANNE FROON, who's a girl that was born on September 24th of 1991. She was the daughter of Dini and Peter Froon. They say she was a very optimistic woman, very hopeful, very smart. She liked volleyball and she constantly practiced it. She was really fond of adventures, adrenaline, and she also liked to practice what is known as skydiving. And not only that, but she combined all those qualities she had with the fact that she really loved sports. On the other hand, we have KREMERS, who was a girl that was born on August 2nd, 1992. She was the daughter of Rolly Creed and Hans KREMERS. She was also a creative, open-minded, and responsible woman. And she was a woman who did well in her studies. She truly cared about that, like she wanted to be the best and stand out in her studies. Both of them were born and raised in Amersfoort. LISANNE, on one hand, graduated from the university where she had studied applied science, and KRIS studied sociocultural education with an artistic education specialization. They became really good friends, and on a trip they made, they decided to move in together. They became roomies and really good friends. From there, they decided to start working in a coffee shop called Hap. And they decided to work there because they wished to travel to somewhere in South America to do some volunteering, learn many things, learn Spanish, help people. But obviously for that they needed money, so they started to work there together and began to save enough money to be able to travel. They were doing that job for 6 months until at last they decided to travel to the country of Panama. That's how they traveled from the Netherlands, their native country, to Costa Rica first, where they spent some time, and then they finally went to Panama. They arrived there on March 15 of 2024. And during the first 2 weeks, they did like a first tour without working. So they went to different spots in Panama. They uploaded many pictures on their Facebook, and obviously they started meeting many people, more volunteers, other foreigners, among others. And that's how on March 29, they at last came to work for a specific family. And with that family's children. Let's say that this became the job they would have a while. At the same time, they studied Spanish and did some volunteering work. They meet many local people who got very excited about the volunteering work, and they also got excited not only for the volunteering work, but because of the possibility of getting to know new places while they did that. They were staying in the Bocas del Toro province, which is very close to a place called El Pianista. The history of the place is called El Pianista because people say that in a different time, a man lived on the top of that mountain and he played the piano all the time. So they decided to call that place that way. But that's where the events of this case begin. After 1 or 2 days of doing volunteering work for that new family, they decide to take a trip in their remaining time. There are 2 versions regarding this story. On April 1st at 11 in the morning, they go to El Pianista, the place I told you, which is an enormous natural reserve in which you can, well, they don't recommend walking much because it's big, but you can go on certain hikes and stuff. So besides that, it looks like a paradise. It's beautiful and many people are interested in going there. They decided to go there, and according to the first version, they decide to take the dog out. This is where the 2 versions differ because it's unknown if that was the dog. People say that it was the dog of the family. Other people say that it was the dog of a restaurant that was close by to where the events happened. However, it's not really known where that dog came from, but it is said that they went out with the dog to do this hike around 11:30 a.m. The specific hours are known because they published some photos on Facebook and saying that they were going at that place. It is said that they were seen with another two guys having lunch, precisely in the restaurant that I told you was close by, and from there they kept going forward. According to that place's description, it appears to be a really nice path, which apparently had some kind of rocks that practically guide people, but according to some, it's a path that has a point in which you can't go forward, so you're forced to go back to not get lost. The idea is not to deviate from there because it could be complicated to keep going. It's a hike you take in about 3 to 5 hours, so it's quite a long hike. However, we're going to go with the version about the dog being from the family they were working with, cause it's not crucial. But they say they noticed something odd when the dog came back without them. Let's say that during that night they didn't get worried or anything. They said like, well, they're girls, they're young, maybe they just changed their plans. And maybe they decided to go somewhere else. On the next day they did get worried because they didn't show up to the Spanish class they were taking in their assigned place. Besides, the next day they had an appointment with a local guide. They had hired him so he could guide them through the tour they had gone on alone the day before. So that was weird because they never show up, and so the search started. Let's say that according to the Facebook pictures, what people say is that they went with very few clothes. I mean, normal style were their bras, a shirt, short, tennis, and some basic stuff on their backpacks. People truly think that they weren't planning on staying there more time than normal or stipulated that day. Around that time when they disappeared, it is said that the guy they had hired for the tour went the next day to the house they were staying in and started to go through everything they had in their room, which is very particular. I'll talk to you more about that later so I can explain some things to you. Let's say that the officers and the people began getting ready for the search. They took water, took dogs, took enough food to last, but to no avail, for they didn't find any trace of them. It truly was a complicated search because the place was very big, and they simply didn't have any idea about where to begin. Several days passed like that. Evidently, they continued searching, but it was in vain. Some days before, the parents found out about the disappearance and they obviously panicked. They didn't have any answers, so the parents decided to travel on April 6th from the Netherlands to Panama to try and help with the search and know what happened to their daughters. And not only that, but the parents also brought with them a police unit from the Netherlands, some supporting search efforts that were a little more professional. Also, they offered $30,000 reward to anyone who had information or knew about the girls. A lot of time passed like that, with the search without results. 10 weeks to be precise. By June 14, 2014, there's finally like a glimpse of something, like a clue. A woman goes to the police with a blue backpack who belonged to LISANNE. She says that she found it in a very specific area at the shore of the Alta Romero River, which is an area that's more remote, where she supposedly went often. She assures that the backpack wasn't there the day before, and she doesn't know who left it there. Inside the backpack, they found some specific things: sunglasses for both of them, 2 bras, $83 in cash, LISANNE's passport, a bottle of water, a camera, and their cell phones. Everything was packed, it was dry and in perfect conditions, which is very particular, and we'll talk about it later. Obviously, as they found the camera and the cell phones, they obviously opened them and investigation starts to try to find clues or indications about what happened to the girls. The cell phones had been active during almost 10 days after the disappearance. It is said that only during the first 4 days, namely after they went out between the 1st and 4th of April, they tried to make at least 77 calls to the emergency services, and some to the Panama emergency number, which is 911. It is said that just 2 hours after starting the hike they were on, around 1 in the afternoon, they made the first call to the emergencies. I mean, only 2 hours had passed, and it seemed like the girls were already in trouble. However, that's not a place with phone service, so none of these calls they made to emergencies went through, except one that lasted about 3 seconds and then got disconnected. However, the calls don't give many indications. They weren't good either to activate like a tracker, a GPS that indicated what they had walked during that time. They only found that they made those calls and that was like an important point of the investigation. They kept tracking and searching the zone, and after several months, they are also able to find KRIS shorts at the shore of a river. Other people say that it was maybe tied to a rock, but it is thought that it was at the shore of a river. 2 more months passed when, at last, they found 2 things that are key to the case. 1, a pelvic bone, and 2, a foot that is still inside a boot. I mean, it was in the boot, like a good foot inside of it. On one hand, you could see that LISANNE's bones appear to have decomposed naturally. On the other hand, KRIS's bones seem wider than normal, which is something I also mention later. Sorry I'm postponing things, but it's because that's part of all the theories. They found a total of 33 bones, of which 28 belonged to LISANNE. The rest of them belonged to KRIS. This was very interesting because where were the rest of the bones? Besides, as I've told you, they found the camera they had, which is another very interesting piece of evidence of this case. There was a total of 99 photos which reveal different things. Let's say that the first ones were photos that showed the girls' hike, the view, the path they were on, but towards the end you could see some photos taken on April 8 between 1 and 4 in the morning, and those didn't make much sense. They're like different photos from the place of rocks, of grass. Some are blurred. It's like they're not in the pictures anymore, but just this kind of things. There's one that just shows some toilet paper placed near where the person who took the photo was, and another that shows KRIS' head with what they say it's a wound. Obviously that photo wasn't released to the public, and I won't show it here because I don't want my video taken down. What's curious is that just 3 of these photos were very clear. The rest of them don't make sense. And that's when everybody asks what truly happened. There's something curious, however, that can't be found everywhere and gives us specific information. The photos they found, let's say that very few were released to the public. The police and the investigator have the rest of the photos and they have never wanted to reveal them. Other fact which is very curious is that 2 photos were deleted from the camera when the camera was found. They were already deleted. Let's say that photos, when one downloads them on the computer, they'd hide like a certain consecutive numbers, and on the camera we're missing the 8 and the 9. The photos skipped from the 7 to the 10. So people started wondering why were those photos deleted? Who deleted those photos? And when did that happen? But it is known that it happened while the girls still had it. But before we talk about the theories and all that, there's something kind of paranormal that happens within this case. A medium who helped with this investigation. Obviously, there came a point in which they didn't find any information before all this happened, or they were finding any trace of the girls. And people sometimes think that the physical things are not enough. Helicopters, dogs, people searching. And there also could be people that have certain gifts to find things or to see certain things. They invited a medium to help them with the case. He went with one of the guides and with the police to the investigation, and they said it was truly amazing, for he started drawing the landscapes and everything that was on the place just because he had seen in his mind. He had never been to that place, he didn't know the paths, but he had it very clear in his head. They say that this man had a sort of vision of something that happened to those girls, precisely 42 kilometers away from the path where they started, and he said that he felt those girls' fear and the impulse to run away from there. Everybody said that during one of those sessions when they were talking, the man stopped and started having a canalization. He said he saw how a woman with blonde hair and other with darker hair started to run. Something that terrorized them was chasing them. And he said that at one point they reached quite a big darkness and they fell off a dark cliff. The blonde tries to help the other and that both end up falling off a cliff. The dark-haired one is injured and they can't move. Let's say that was the only thing he saw. Maybe he contributed with something, and let's say that he gathered a testimony for something that could be used for the investigation later. But some people didn't believe what he was saying. But it's time to dive deep into the theories of this case regarding what happened. Let's say that there's the official theory, which is the one I always start with, that states that the girl's death was simply accidental. There's a river called Coulebre, which flows really close to the area where they were found, and where the girl's backpack was found. And they say the river took them. It seems like at some point the police thought that the girls, being lost, slipped on a rock. Or there's something called the monkey bridge, that's a bridge with 3 ropes, one here, one there, and other down there. And you have to step on a little rope to be able to cross it. They're generally bridges that are on top of rivers, so they say that maybe they also tried to cross one of these bridges and fell, or that something just happened that injured them and they ended up that way. Maybe this was the reason why they start to call 911. Like maybe they suffered some injury, or one of them. It could have been KRIS because of the photo of the head wound that was inside the camera. And then this is connected with the 911 calls that they made on several occasions, when it is thought that they were slowly feeling more tension and when they were worried and wanted to be rescued. There's something important I didn't mention, and it is that they turn on and off their cell phones in specific moments, and it is thought that obviously those were moments to save some cell phone battery, given that the calls weren't connecting. When they turned them on, they tried calling again, but they couldn't, until one of the cell phones was the first one to run out of battery. On the 4th day of their disappearance, the other one lasted for 6 days. So it is said that they were alive for around 10 days. It is thought that LISANNE was alive a little longer than KRIS, given that you can see that she probably is the one taking the picture and calling from the cell phones. There's something very particular, and it is that KRIS' cell phone is turned on after LISANNE's is out of battery. It seems like she tries to enter the cell password and isn't able to unlock it. So people think that something happened to KRIS, so she couldn't give LISANNE the password and make the call. So people think that KRIS died before LISANNE, and she was alive for some more days until she finally dies of starvation, dehydration, maybe because of some wounds and because of the extreme conditions of the place. It is thought then that they died and they took so many months to find their bodies, for they were in a not so known area, and later probably the animals of the area found the lifeless bodies and ate the flesh and the bones, many of the bones that they didn't find. And in the end, this was the version the police gave regarding what happened to those girls. They also say that the bones they found, or like the evidence they found, never led them to think about violence against them. No DNA of other humans was found. They were simply their bones after an accident or decomposed in some place. They also say that there are a lot of venomous snakes that live in their area. Lots of ocelots, wolves, coyotes, so maybe those are the animals that ate them. Besides, they always recommended, supposedly within the tourist plan, to not enter that area without a guide who knows it, for people can get lost. They connected that to all the emergency calls they made and say that after 2 hours of walking, they realized they were lost. And that's when they started making the calls. The photos that were found, all those pictures taken between 1 and 4 in the morning of April 8, were actually photos that LISANNE supposedly tried to take looking for a path or some light, for it was really dark. Probably there's people who think that she did that to try to go find help for KRIS, who probably had a head wound. Everything was dark, so she needed the flash to make it. She didn't have her cell phone on, so maybe she decided to use the camera, and that's with their photos that don't make sense. Other people think that maybe there were some helicopters or something flying about them, so she tried to make something with the lights to grab their attention. However, here's when some people think that the official theory doesn't make any sense and that something worse happened to them. There's actually something really interesting, and it is that a sufficiently thorough investigation of the bodies was never made. And neither of the case, for the people from the Panama government were afraid about that affecting the tourism, especially because tourism in Panama comes in its majority from people from the United States, Canada, and Europe. So they didn't want those news to spread, causing people to cancel their trips. Nonetheless, there are many tourists that have disappeared since that time, and even before in that area. And there's there's not been much talk about that. At that time, one of the investigators says the bed from the river that supposedly took the girls was a little dry, so it was impossible for it to take them. They didn't make sure of handling correctly the evidence when it was found. I mean, the woman who found the blue backpack just handed it over. Everybody touched that without the proper care that had to be had. They say there was no security personnel who tried to handle the evidence properly, and that this interfered in the making of a proper investigation as it should be. On the other hand, there's not any specific time of death, because obviously the whole bodies of the girls weren't found. So the exact time of death for each body was never determined. Also, the police could never truly explain how they fell. There are only theories, but it was never explained from where they fell or something like it. Because there's also no blood traces or things like that to be found on the place of the events. So there are many questions. One of them being, where's the rest of this woman's bones? The human body has more than 200 bones. So how is it that they only found not even 10% of them? And there are people who say that it is impossible that an animal ate them, for there aren't many animals that are thought to wild in the area, or at least animals that have close encounters with humans in that area. Besides the bones they found, they didn't have any marks of bites or something like that, teeth or claw marks, absolutely anything. Here I'm going to show you the map of the route they took, so you can understand it to an extent. The orange dot, it's the point where they begin their hike, so they start walking on that path and arrive to the green dot, which is a very beautiful viewpoint, very big. It is where they take one of those Facebook pictures. They keep going and find a ravine, which is El Diamante, and on this ravine they also took one of the pictures that showed them crossing. Well, KRIS crossing. Further down, it is said that the two red dots are two houses that are inside that place. Nothing much is known about the owners, we just simply know that those are two houses which are built in that area. And it is said that further along, the blue dot is where the shorts or jeans of KRIS were found the first time. Going forward, you can see the dark blue dot, and it is said that there is where they found KRIS' pelvic bone and the boot with LISANNE's foot still inside. The purple dot is where they found her backpack, and finally the yellow dot is where they found one of KRIS' ribs many years later. So there it is, so you can understand more the map of the route they took. As you can see, it's very far away. There's a lot of distance between their starting point and where they found their remains. It is unknown what happened. It was something really curious that they cover so much distance. So here we go with the next theory, which talks about a possible murder of the girls. Let's say that there are many that think, even people who knew them, say that they are sure that it could be a murder. And this is based on the hypothesis from many investigators who say that it was unlikely that they got lost so easily. It seems like the path they were on is a path that comes to a point in which you're forced to go back. So people find really strange that they got lost that easily. And all this has been thought because similar events have happened through the years after and even before this. And many people think like, if the girls disappeared together, why were their remains found so far apart? As I've told you, there have been several disappearances and deaths in these last few years after they disappeared, around 200 deaths, on which 1/3 of these deaths have happened just in the following years of this girl disappearance, and the last third happened before their disappearance. Not much has been said about the topic, because Panama doesn't want its tourism to be affected. And there's something very particular, and it is, as I've told you, that one of the bones was too white. People say that it is impossible for that to happen through a natural process. If an animal eats them, the bones would not be as white. And they say they could have gone through a really similar process to those that the mob cartels use, in which they incinerate the bodies in acid and the bones come out white. Maybe something like that happened to one of them. They conclude that because they say that a similar case occurred, in which also a foreigner boy got lost in that area, but unlike with them, the forensics were able to find 98% of the boy's body, and none of the bones were as white as one of the girl's bones. Also, is something very particular that the government 100% refuses to reveal the autopsies. If they truly say that the girls just fell accidentally, then why aren't they revealing the autopsies? Why were the shorts, KRIS jeans, so far away from LISANNE from her bones? It is like, no matter how strong the river was, it couldn't have taken them away from her. They would have to have been removed from her body somehow. She would have to have taken them out, or somebody had to force her to take them out. There was no way that the shorts would have come out on their own. On the other hand, something that blew my mind was why were the boots in so good shape if they were supposedly went through all of this? They slipped and fell. The boots should have been ragged, full of mud, and that wasn't how they actually found them. They were in really good shape. And also, precisely the backpack they had, the blue backpack they found, where all their belongings were, was also in perfect shape. It wasn't even wet. The things inside of it weren't wet, nor the camera, nor the cell phones. So if they fell into the river with all of this, and the river dragged them, everything should be wet. But nothing like that happened. Besides, even if the river didn't drag them, at that time there were 2 months of intense rainfall, and the backpack wasn't wet either, so it's very weird. On the other hand, among the belongings that were found inside the backpack, they found 2 bras, as I've told you. One of them was the bra that LISANNE was wearing that day. One of the photos that they posted on Facebook before going out, you can see the part of the bra on her. It was the same bra that they found. Why would they take off their bras in that situation? Unless they came out on their own. But they would have founded them in other area. Or if they take them out and put them inside the backpack, it's so weird because one, in their condition, wouldn't take off clothes because of the cold and everything. Also, why did they took so many photos at that hour? It is like very strange, like something was chasing them. There are people who say that it was to go to the path where KRIS was to go and help her. Others say that these pictures were taken in moments in which they had to run away. Others say they took them to keep the animals away, to deter them from coming close. People think something happened to KRIS, for her to not be able to enter her cell phone password after a while. The police also found very strange that if they fell off some cliff, or if the river dragged them, there was no reason for them to break in thousands of pieces and for them not to find their remains for so long. It's very odd. So there are many inconsistencies regarding this case. People tell that there were criminals around that time, and that there are still criminals in that area of Panama. And here we can connect quite particularly 2 people who could have committed the crime. One of them was a man called Frank Pardo, who was apparently a man who was in jail after murdering a woman in the year of 1996. He was released around the time they were hiking. It is said that he was recaptured in 2017 for the murder of another woman. So the number of women that he murdered is unknown, but we can link it for around that time he was involved in that case. And lastly, the other possible culprit that we have, it's the guy they were going on tour with the next day. And why? It was really odd that the next day after they disappeared, this man went to their house, entered the room, and started inspecting their room without the police authorization. He went inside, began exploring this girl's things, and that didn't make any sense. He was very involved in the investigation in the sense that he wanted to go and guide the police and blah. It is also said that on some occasion after they disappeared, he went alone to the area to look for them. When he was questioned about where the girls were or if he knew anything, he talked about El Pianista, namely the area where they went missing, without anyone knowing that they were there. On the other hand, on one occasion, he spoke about precisely the area where they were found. So there are 2 versions about this person. There are people who say that he's a super nice man, a guy who's very knowledgeable and very passionate about his work, that he knows a lot of things, and they hold them a great esteem. But there are other testimonies that are not like that. There's a testimony of a photographer who was going to the area. He tried to hire him, but apparently he was very rude with him. and told him he didn't do tours for men, that he only liked to do them with women and European women at that. Also, there is a woman who works in a hostel and who testified that she didn't let that man into this place anymore, for he was a man that harassed her foreign women guests, especially the Europeans. On the other hand, there's the testimony of a couple. They say that the man approached them and that he was very close to his girlfriend. He touched her until the guy had to tell him a stop. So it was very odd that this was the first man that went looking for them and the first one to find them. Besides, it's thought then that maybe this was the man that deleted the 2 missing pictures from the camera, for maybe he appeared in those photos. And there are other strange things. The taxi driver that brought the women to the area before their hike was murdered. Panama's authorities never did anything. As I told you, the families also decided to leave the case there, stay silent and went away. And because it was seen that those girls walked for such a long time without knowing where they were going. It is said that now the FBI is investigating this case and that it's a really private one. Nobody knows much about it. Well, this was a long case, friends. My throat hurts now. I tried to research it a lot, looking for the incoherences, because in the beginning I only found the official version of them having an accident, but for me it wasn't so easy to believe that had happened. So I decided to investigate more, and here's the case. So I hope you like it a lot. You know that if so, don't forget to leave a like, the thumbs up. Don't forget to comment to leave me suggestions about other videos you want to see in this channel. Follow me in my social media, you know I have a billion social media accounts. Subscribe to this channel and activate the notification bell so it lets you know when I upload a new video. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching me. Don't forget to follow your dreams, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!